Hello, beautiful people. In today's episode, I'm joined by Matthew Kobach, and Matthew is the Director of Content Marketing at Fast, and he has previously worked as the New York Stock Exchange Social Media Manager. In this conversation, we dived into how he's become such a great writer, what it's like building a social media account for a startup, and what he learned from interviewing Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah, really. Shaquille O'Neal. How crazy is that? If you're new here, new episodes drop Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I absolutely love your feedback. If you want to give me any feedback on the episode, you can find me at Hey Danny Miranda on Twitter. And let's get right into it, guys.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
For people who aren't familiar with you, just give everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So currently I'm the Director of Content Marketing at a startup called Fast. Been there for about 3 months now. Before then, I worked for a company called Intercontinental Exchange. It's not a company that most people know of, but they know one of the companies that they own. They own the New York Stock Exchange. I headed up the social media and digital marketing for that company, so that included the New York Stock Exchange. Before then, I had started a social media marketing firm. Before then, I had worked at a social media marketing analytics company. And before then, I was in academia, and I thought my career was going to be a professor. Thought I'd be doing research and teaching. And before then, I got a master's in communication. And before then, I was in college, and before then, I was in high school. And fast forward to now, and here I am talking to you.
Wow, hell of a journey. And so talk to me. It sounds like your whole history has been in social media, and social media has been something you've been thinking about for the past, it sounds like 10 years. Talk about why you were so attracted to social media in general.
So when I mentioned that I thought I was going to be an academic, it started back then. So I was in a program called, I think at the time it was called the telecommunications program. But really, it was just a way to study the effects of media. That was pretty much what our department did. And everyone within our department had a different area of expertise. So some people were experts in politics in the media, or children in the media, or sex in the media. And so this is 2008, give or take. And so at this point, it was clear social media was a thing. People were using it. It was, pretty ubiquitous. But no one had really studied it yet. And so there weren't really any experts in this area. So I kind of decided this will be my niche. And it's funny, I think this ended up being I didn't know it at the time, but really a life strategy is instead of going into an area where I thought there'd be a lot of competition, I just picked an area where I knew there'd be no competition because it was so new. So it ends up kind of being this life lesson where a great way to make sure that you're successful is to don't go after the job that everyone wants. Find the diamond in the rough job that doesn't look as attractive, but that you can either build something that is more attractive or that perhaps other people are overlooking. And so that's really how I got into social media. When I started, people made fun of me. It wasn't clear that it was necessarily going to be a area that people wanted to investigate, but I kind of had this feeling that in my gut, I knew it was going to be even bigger, like that we were only scratching the surface. So I had to kind of tune out those naysayers. But when you have that many naysayers, it really does reduce competition. So it's easy to ascend the ranks when there's not as many people trying to do it. It's kind of like if you want a job, you could go into sports, you could go into entertainment, stuff like that, but that's what everyone wants to do. So the competition is unbelievably high. And then because everyone wants to do it, the payouts aren't actually as great. Maybe for like the top people, they're great, but for a majority of people, you don't actually get that great of a reward. So I kind of dumb lucked into it. It would just happen to be at the right place at the right time. And the interest in my life have always kind of been human nature and communication and kind of marketing. And so social media just kind of became a vessel for those interests. And it's something that I followed for the past, 10, 12 years now.
Yeah, I love that you said and you brought up that people initially made fun of you for this. And it's so interesting to think about, right? Because social media is something that pretty much everyone does. And in the beginning, it's easy to point out and see like that someone's doing something odd and point and laugh at that person. Like I even remember reading one piece and one article that referred to you as Snappy for Snapchat when I don't know if that was done in jest but the point is that it was like you really, when you're doing something new, you're always going to just rub people the wrong way, and people are going to say, why is someone doing this? And it's just a reminder to, if someone's making fun of you, there might be a reason why, and you might be doing something right. And so I think that's super important to think about.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just, you as a person. You can almost look at it as, a business. The bigger you get, the more shots people are going to take at you. The more you kind of hype up your own product or service or whatever it might be, you're going to have some people rooting against you. And what you have to figure out is, do the pros outweigh the cons? And so for me, going down social media or even having a public persona on Twitter, the pros, almost infinitely outweigh the cons. So yeah, you're going to have some people taking shots at you or some people kind of snickering or laughing or pointing or talking behind your back. But, people talking behind your back, like what a great problem to have. Because one, it means you're doing something right. And two, you can't hear them anyways. It's a very much ignorance is bliss. Like if you, your company or you as a person or your career, whatever it might be, keeps ascending and you've got some people that just like to criticize and say stuff, but you never hear it. Like, who cares? What, you keep ascending and, leave those people in your dust.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit about quote unquote haters and quote unquote people who are talking bad about you and how you've dealt with that, as if that's happened at all, from as you've grown your own Twitter account from, I don't know when you started, probably 0, right? And to now it's close to 80,000, I believe, followers on Twitter. Talk about that journey and when you started to receive negative comments, if you have at all, and how you've dealt with that mentally, and just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So everyone starts at 0. They don't give anyone any followers just for joining. I do feel very fortunate with my Twitter. So there's a couple things that work in my favor. One is just who I am, what I look like, the stuff that I was born into. And those things lined up for me that I'm just the type of person to get less vitriol in general. So it makes me not as large of a target, or there's less hate towards someone who just looks like me without ever knowing me. So I've got that benefit. 2, I've also got the benefit of, for whatever reason, the type of people that follow me don't tend to be the type of people that engage in that kind of stuff. So it's really a testament to the community that follows me or is interested in what I have to say, that for the most part, they're very respectful when they disagree, or they're really respectful when they don't like what I have to say. So it's not that everyone agrees with everything I say. It's that when people do disagree, it's very productive. I've had, and I actually enjoy some of those people more than people that, agree with everything I say. And then, yes, there are people that, are just mean to be mean. And I wish I had an answer for how to deal with that. I think for me, it helps that it doesn't happen a lot. But it also just kind of feels like I'm hardwired that way, where someone says something and I'm not the type of person to sit and think about it over and over. It's kind of like you hear it, you read it, and then as soon as it's in your head, it's out of your head. It helps that, for every one negative comment, you get 10,000 great ones. So it's easy to kind of dismiss those and just not give it any more thought. The way that I tend to deal with a lot of them is, and this is what I found best kind of shuts them up, is I just agree with them. I don't, if you fight them, they win. If you ignore them, it's kind of a tie. And if you agree with them, I found that that's like the opposite of what they want. So someone goes, God, you're too preachy on Twitter. I hate it. And I go, yeah, you're probably right. I probably am a little too preachy. I should dumb that down a little bit. Like there's literally nothing left for them to say because you've agreed with the point that they're trying to use to hurt you. So, and sometimes what they're saying is true. You know, it's probably not said in a way. It's said in a way that's not meant to be helpful. That's meant to be hurtful. But you know, and you just kind of have to decipher. All right, is this person saying this out of you know, is there any validity to what they're saying, or is it just someone who wants to be a troll? But either way, agreeing with them, if you've got the, you know, if you can kind of stand it, is the way that I found kind of shuts them up the quickest.
I love that. I love that because, and it's so fascinating because I think it was actually mentioned today in James Clear's 321 newsletter, which he said something along the lines of, if someone disagrees with you, the best thing to say is, yeah, you're probably right. Because a lot of things that we waste mental energy on are disagreements about petty little things that don't matter. And if you can just have the ability to just say, yeah, you're right, it allows, you know, the other person to feel good, and it ends the interaction on a positive note.
And I think even more importantly than ending it on a positive note, we only have a limited amount of things we can think about, of brain power that we can use on a given day. And so the more brain power you're using trying to convince someone that Michael Jordan is better than LeBron James, it just doesn't really go anywhere. You know, you're just kind of like pedaling on a stationary bike. So there's so many things that you could use your energy or your brain power towards that, and maybe the basketball analogy wasn't great, but I think you get the point I'm making, where everything is limited. Everything is finite in terms of, you know, the time you have in a day and time to think about things. So use it on more productive things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so happy you brought up that basketball analogy, because one thing that I wanted to talk to you about was you meeting and interviewing Shaquille O'Neal at the New York Stock Exchange. What is that experience like? And do you have any other cool experiences? I'm sure you do, of things that happened that you just couldn't believe in your time as a social media correspondent there?
100%. Before I tell you about Shaq, I kind of want to go back to the what I said in the beginning, where I first talked about going into social media because it seemed like there was less competition. That's actually the exact way I got the job at the New York Stock Exchange. It was a job posting that was really boring. You know, it was from this company that's based in Atlanta that does energy, that owns a bunch of energy exchanges. And never in a million years would someone want to do social media for a company like that. But I researched it, looked into it, and realized that they own the New York Stock Exchange, and realized that the position they were really hiring for was for someone mostly to do the social media for the New York Stock Exchange. So the reason I got to do all those cool things was because I found a job where the competition was significantly less, because you know, you had to kind of dig a little deeper to find out what the job really was. So without kind of having that mentality, I never would have been able to do all this cool stuff anyways.
Wow.
Back to your question. I still remember one of the more surreal moments there was when I was getting ready to interview Shaquille O'Neal a second time. And I remember thinking, I'm about to interview Shaquille O'Neal again. And never in a million years did I think that sentence would come out of my mouth. Because I never wanted to be a reporter or a journalist. Like, that was never something I aspired to be. The way it happened was I was in charge of content. And kind of over this, you know, 6 years that I was there, content on social media changed from like posting pictures to being very, you know, man on the street, from like getting cell phone videos. And so it became like, we need someone to capture this content with these cool people that are coming in here. And Matt's the one who does the social media and has the content. So I guess let's, you know, put him, let's make him the face of this aspect of our company. So really it was, again, being in the right place at the right time, dumb luck. And I've really gone a long-winded answer to your question, but it was awesome. It's surreal. It's still tough to kind of believe that that's what was going on. Shaq himself is very dry. You never know. I literally did not know if he was having fun with me or if he was like completely annoyed or if he was upset. He's just got a very dry, plain way of delivering stuff. He did everything we asked. He was very polite, but he's tough to read. I think that's just kind of his humor. So, it's fun, didn't mind. And yes, he is very, very tall. Sitting down, he's still taller than I am.
Okay, so what sticks out to me as someone who is a rookie interviewer, this is probably my 22nd or 23rd podcast, something like that. What do you do in a situation where the guest is dry and you can't get a read on them? What tips would you have for someone who's in my position as the interviewer for something like that, if something like that were to happen?
For what it's worth, I was making it up as I went too. Like I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have any advice. And it wasn't like a traditional interview process. It wasn't, a 45-minute podcast, and it wasn't like a TV interview. It was like stuff we were kind of doing on the phone and setting this up. The stuff that, and also too, whenever I interviewed someone, they had an agenda. So it's not like they just coincidentally came and I was like, oh, let me grab 5 minutes of your time to do this. They were always there to promote something. Mm-hmm. So when Shaq came, I forget why he came for the first time, but I remember the second time he was just appointed to the Papa John's board. So, and he was there going on CNBC and, Fox Business or whatever else it was to promote that fact and to really highlight the fact. I think they had some racial issues at the time. So having him on the board was a big, I don't want to say it was only a PR thing, but it was certainly a PR. There was certainly a PR element to it, which is why he was there. So getting him on to talk about Papa John's was really easy, and he already knows, he has his talking points down. So for me, it was almost more pitching. It was like, how can I convince this person? Because a lot of times we didn't know if they would do an interview until they were there and their publicist said yes. So getting them on, but again, kind of lucky for me, they were there to talk about something that they were either passionate about or that they were like mentally prepared to do. So they kind of had their talking points up there. So it wasn't, I never really got anyone who didn't want to talk. I kind of had some people that you could tell were they didn't want to be doing it, but they were obligated to do it. So it was almost like they put on a bit of a show and, they can kind of tell their heart wasn't really into it. And for those, I didn't really have a good an answer for how to get them to liven up or to help get them to pull their guard down a little bit. My experience with those people was I'd rather not interview them, and and luckily for you, you're in a situation where anyone doing this podcast is going to likely be eager to do it. So you don't really have to have that kind of issue. The best way for you to not run into that issue is to be preventative. So, find someone. Is this someone who's done a lot of podcasts in the past? Is this someone that it would be their first time, or is it someone, like when you ask them, did they kind of hem and haw? It's almost like you want people that are super interested in doing it. And if you don't have that, then you set yourself up for the possibility of failure. So find the people that are eager to do stuff like this. And if it's someone new, make sure you get a hell yes, as opposed to a let me think about it. Because the enthusiasm is what you want.
Makes complete sense. And thank you for that answer. So one of the things that you do is you go on these podcasts and you have a policy, it seems, to just say yes to any opportunity that comes your way. Why did you put this in? And it's something that I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about.
Sure. It's and for clarification, I don't say yes to everything anymore. It's kind of it's almost like bell curve of life. So when you're young, say yes to as many opportunities as you can. They're not all going to be worth your time. but you're gonna, you just don't have that many. So you need to grab onto anyone that you have, and hopefully there's some serendipity and a little luck, and hopefully you say the right things or do the right things. That some of these opportunities lead to more opportunities, and that's why you want to say yes. If you do that and you're successful with it, you're going to get to a point where you have now too many opportunities. You have too many people asking you for interviews or your time or whatever it might be. And so that's when you now have to start saying no to opportunities, and you have to start identifying the ones that are going to yield the biggest return for the least amount of your investment. So do you want to say, if you're getting 100 interview requests a month, you're going to have to only say yes to the biggest ones with the biggest reach, to the people you want to talk to. And, that plucky young podcast startup that maybe doesn't have the same viewership, you just unfortunately can't say yes to them because the return isn't there for you. But when you're getting, no podcast requests, it's a lot easier to say yes to any opportunity that comes by. And the best thing that you can do is, if you are someone who isn't quite, if you want someone else's time and you're not quite at the, maybe you can't quite give them the return that they want, at least in terms of viewership, the best way to get it is to entice them with a conversation that they want to have. So try to figure out something that they're not normally talking about, or that they don't always get to talk about, and see if you can woo them that way.
It's great advice, and something that I'll be considering for my young and upstart podcast. So one thing that I wanted to talk to you about was, you had this statement on the Modern Wisdom podcast, and you were talking with Chris Williamson about how people think that advertising doesn't work and marketing doesn't work, and that's a belief they have. And you said repeated exposure impacts behavior. What I wanted to talk to you about was, have you ever tried to do this on a personal level as opposed to a marketing level? For example, I said to myself, I love myself enough times where I actually started to believe it. The repeated exposure of saying I love myself led it to be true. Has that happened for you at all in your personal life with anything you've done? I'm very curious about that.
I don't know if this counts as something I've done, but I think I can give an example that a lot of people will relate to and understand. So repeated exposure, aka familiarity, breeds affection. The kind of, you see an ad over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if you like the ad. Once you become familiar with it, you're more likely to buy that product. So oddly enough, relationships work the same way, and both platonic and romantic. So the more you see someone, the more you like them, the more you trust them, the more you want to do business with them, or go out and get a drink with them, or go on a vacation with them. So it's this repeated exposure to people makes you like them more. And the same works romantically. I'm sure there's plenty of people that have, it's either happened to themselves or happened to friends of theirs, where it was a couple that they weren't a couple, but they kind of were in the same friend group, and they kind of kept hanging out and seeing each other. And this mutual attraction kind of developed over time. It's really the same concept as advertising. And so if you're in a position where, you want to woo a romantic partner, your best bet is to get as much face time with that person as you can. And if you want to deepen friendships, you're going to have to spend as much time with them as you can. And we're in a digital space now where you can supplement in-person stuff for, text or video chat or whatever it might be. But it's really familiarity just results, and, kind of repeated exposure just results in attraction, whether it's, romantic or just friendly attraction.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's from an evolutionary perspective that if we saw something enough times, we knew it to be safe and that thing wouldn't kill us?
Yeah, 100%. The people that you see all the time are likely the people that are in your tribe, and that are likely the people that are going to, supply you with protection or food or whatever it might be. If you are in a position where you don't have any, or you need extra, or whatever it might be. The people around you, it behooves everyone to cooperate. And so when you know someone, the more you know someone, the more likely you are to cooperate with them. And so it's just this, I don't want to say it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's it's this way where they, it's kind of circular. I'm trying to think of the word here. Um, it's like where it's like a chicken and egg thing where like the more you see someone, the more you cooperate, the more you cooperate, the more you like them, the more you like them, the more you cooperate and all that
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think we're just hardwired that way. Like someone that wrongs you, someone that you see over and over, likely isn't someone that you're going to have issues with, because if you have issues with them, that person's no longer part of your life, especially if you go back to a time where maybe someone's trying to steal your food or whatever it might be. You're not going to have a lot of interactions with that person. You're going to do whatever you can to avoid that person. So the more you see someone, the more trust you have with them, and the more likely you are to trust them with your family or your food or your resources, whatever it might be.
Makes complete sense. And I couldn't finish this conversation, or couldn't talk to you about this conversation without bringing up your role at Fast. And your role at Fast has been so interesting for me to follow. And what I'd love for you to talk about is just start off with how you got the job at Fast and why you, like, the things that you did prior in terms of calling CEOs and talking to them before getting this job. Talk a little bit about that and why you started reaching out to CEOs.
Sure. So when I was at the New York Stock Exchange, I'd kind of made the decision I wanted to try to go to a startup. Like I just had it was kind of this itch that I just made up my mind that I had to scratch. And so I kind of figured too, like I'd been in a big corporation, a Fortune 500, and I kind of had a feeling I knew how that worked. And so I wanted to try the other end. And so when I was doing that, I also wanted to go somewhere where they were still relatively new. So like, I don't know, probably a lot of people still call Airbnb a startup. Seems pretty far from it with a, $15 billion valuation or 20 or whatever it is right now. I wanted to go to that place that had just started raising money or was just about to raise money. Because I wanted to kind of be in on the ground floor. I wanted to make those decisions that, echo from years to come. And so what I decided to do is, well, one, I had to figure out like, how do I identify that company? How do I find that company? And how do I make sure I'm not finding a company that seems like it's going to go broke in a year? You want to find a company that's at the ground floor, but has a lot of potential and seems to have a long runway. And so what I started doing was just keeping my ear out and keeping my head on a swivel kind of for these companies that met that criteria. And so anytime I came across a company that did, and it could be from reading an article on, Business Insider, maybe a friend told me about it, maybe I heard about it on Twitter, but whatever it was, whenever one of those companies came up, I found the founder or CEO, it's usually the same person, and I just reached out to him. And I didn't really pitch him on anything. I didn't, it was more, if anything, it was kind of complimentary to what they were doing, or like as in a compliment, they took it as what a nice thing to hear, because I would contact them and say, hey, I really like your company. I'm really interested in it. Would you be interested in talking about it? And if you're a founder and you've just started this, this thing's your baby, it's everything you've been working on for the past 6 months or a year, whatever it might be, your odds are you're eager to talk about it and tell other people about it, especially when it's a very generous audience. I'm not an investor trying to be sold to. I'm just someone who's legitimately interested in this business and what they do. And so I did that for a handful of companies. And some of the people I talked to, I got a better idea of the company, and, just it didn't quite meet the criteria that I had set after I talked to them. And for some it did. And for some, you need the stars to align too, because it also had to be a case of, all right, I love what you guys are doing. I like this long runway. Does it matter? Can I add value to this company? And so I first reached out to Dom, who is the founder of Fast, or co-founder of Fast, last year, and had exactly that conversation. It was, I like what you're doing, and can I talk to you about it? And then he told me about it, and I much better understood the company, and I realized that they're solving a problem that everyone who uses the internet has. And so it just instantly clicked to me that someone's going to solve this problem. And this is the only company that I know right now that's working on it. So they're going to have a very large head start. So it was kind of a no-brainer to join. So then, or at least to be interested in it. I think I talked to him when they had 10 employees, maybe even less. I don't even know if it was double digits. And fast forward 6 months later, and he reaches out and says, "Hey, we need someone to head up our content." And I said, "Great." And actually, it wasn't even that. It was, he called me up, or he messaged me and said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about where we're at with the company." I said, "Okay." And he talked to me about content and all this. And then at the end of it, just said, "Do you want to join?" And, it was the most pleasant job interview I've ever had. But it was, all because I decided, and I did this for like 2 years, where I was reaching out to CEOs and stuff. So it took a while. It wasn't like it was my first try. But it was I would do that every time over ever interviewing and submitting a resume ever again. It was such a much more pleasant experience.
It's the perfect example of using Twitter as your resume, and it's super cool to see how it happened. What I'm curious about now, where you are as working for Fast for some time, what are you most proud of that you've done so far for the company?
The amount of people who know us and are rooting for us is kind of significantly beyond what I ever would have guessed, especially within, this is less than 3 months. I mean, realistically, we're closer to 2 months that I've been here, where I'm actually like working and getting ideas implemented. And we've got, I mean, if you see us on Twitter, people are dying to wear hoodies that say Fast. They're following us, they're liking our stuff, they're interacting with us. There's already this kind of trend seeing where, I don't know if this will last, but right now we've kind of got a little momentum. And if you remember 10 years ago, or give or take, everyone was kind of pitching the like, "Oh, my company's Uber except for X. I'm Uber, but except for dog sitting. I'm Uber except for chefs." We're now seeing that with Fast already. Wow. And our flagship product launched less than a month ago. And to see this kind of like, oh yeah, Fast, but for voting, Fast, but for medical forms, Fast, but for the DMV. And the fact that like we've already penetrated that much when like people aren't even necessarily able to use our product all that often. Our goal is to get installed on as many websites as possible. But the fact that we've got this community already thinking this way, that are, it's like they're already 10 steps ahead of us to where we're currently at, and we love it. It's an amazing place to be. So I just the fact that we've built this much passion blows my mind, and something I'm unbelievably proud of.
Yeah, it's incredibly satisfying from a viewer perspective, seeing, exactly what happened, seeing exactly when you joined, seeing some of the things you've implemented in terms of building a community, and watching the growth of it and watching people enjoy it. It's been an absolute pleasure and a actual masterclass in social media displayed on Twitter to watch. So what are some of the practical tactics, let's say, you would give to a company? Obviously, just watch what Fast is doing, but what are the practical tactics you would give to someone listening who has a company who wants to build on social media?
So for us, a lot of what we've done is looked at the hand we're dealt, and then we play that hand. I think a lot of people, when it comes to, I'd say marketing, but life in general, it's, if you're not over 6'5", you're probably not going to be in the NBA. So it's probably not the hand you should play. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we have founders that are very passionate, very bold, and somewhat outspoken. So we realized, like, let's lean into that. They're happy to take a few risks. They're happy to make quick decisions. So we leveraged the personality that comes with the brand, that comes with the founders, to then strengthen our message. And now it feels more, authentic and natural to who we are. So the number one thing you're going to do is figure out, who are you as a company? Like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And once you identify what your weaknesses are, you could try to fix your weaknesses, but you're going to be a lot more effective than if you just lean into your strengths. Mm-hmm. So to be bold, to be a little cheeky, to be interesting was something that we knew we wanted to do, because that's how our founders operated. To something even a little more practical, is social media tends to be very conversational. So we don't use jargon. We don't use complicated language. We're trying to write in ways that is easy to understand and that resonates with people. For Instagram, I actually just launched an Instagram campaign yesterday, and we're going to be doing this for the next month and hopefully several months. Is we needed to figure out why people should follow us on Instagram. We had to give them a reason why. And I think that's important for a lot of companies to think about. So it's, like, what value am I adding to someone's timeline if they follow us? And updates on the company is not enough value. Mm-hmm. Updates on Coca-Cola might be enough value if you're a stockholder, but you're going to have to come up with something else. And so what we had decided was we wanted to try this experiment where we're a young brand. We're still kind of figuring out who we are and what we look like. So we decided, why not outsource our branding to a bunch of artists? And so we've got a collection. I think right now I probably got half a dozen and another half dozen in waiting to give us their interpretation of fast. And so we now get to kind of tell our story through other people's eyes. And we're hoping that seeing kind of cool artists that have all these different styles that they're going to add a kind of a beauty to our brand that otherwise wouldn't have been there. And we hope that that's a good reason to but a good reason to follow us on Instagram.
It's really interesting, right? Because by doing that, you are putting the social in social media. I think so often people forget that social media is actually a way to interact with others and to learn from others and to promote other people's stuff, right? Like this podcast is me promoting you, and like it's like a conversation. And when you're doing that with Fast, that's promoting these other artists in a way. And so if you can be social, if you can just look out for another person, it's like what works on social media works in real life too. If you care about other people, people are going to care about you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We get to leverage the artist's audience, and then the artist gets to leverage our audience. And then on top of it, we're paying them for this work as well. Mm-hmm. So it's just, our goal is that it's this very mutually beneficial transaction where both sides feel like they got more than the other side got.
It's beautiful. So one thing that we think about with social media, me and you, we're active on social media. We believe in its power. Obviously, those are given. But what I often don't think about enough are the downsides. So talk to me about the downsides of social media from just a personal perspective. Like, do you ever feel foggy in your head from using social media? Do you buy the idea that one day we'll think of social media similar to smoking? What's your take on the downsides of social media?
There's no way that we will look at it the same way we look at smoking, only because I would be hard pressed to tell you a benefit of smoking. But I could name half a dozen benefits of social media without even thinking. So I don't buy that. If you want, social media is like one of those things, it's like food. You can't, no food's not healthy. You need to have some food. Too much food is unhealthy. And so it's very much this, bell curve of exposure or use. And so we just need to find the right place. And kind of like anything, you're going to have, people that overindulge and people that, use none and don't get the benefits. But it's certainly not a blanket negative. And if you're going to ask me, it's the sum is positive at the end of it. So it's a net positive for society. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, for the negative, I'm honestly probably not the right person to ask for the negative. We talked earlier about trolls and people spewing hate. And like I said, I am certainly on the low end of people in my position of getting that hate. And so I feel very lucky. But, I don't have the best strategies for combating it. I don't have the best strategies for, getting people to, for dealing with it and stuff. It certainly exists. And it just, like I said, it's kind of, I don't get a lot of it. I find it easy to have it roll off my back. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. And one thing that I wanted to talk to you about is dude, your writing. Your writing is so good, and it's so concise, and it's so clear. And as someone who wants to be a writer someday, talk a little bit about how you got to be such a great writer. Is it something that you've worked on for a long time? Is it always natural? Like, talk to me about your writing.
I am close to 20 years of doing a lot of writing. So when, so I wrote in college, probably no more, no less than the average college student. Once you get a master's, you have to write a thesis. That is a lot of writing. And so it's really just practice. You write it, you redo it, you write a chapter, you redo it, you write a whole thing, you've got to make changes. So there's a lot of practice there. Same with a PhD. PhD is a master's on steroids. You have to write. The funny part is when you write for academia, you have to write in a way, there's a template for kind of how you have to write, or I should say a script for how you have to write. You can't write in everyday talk. You have to write in kind of this disguised academia jargon. And so you get really good at that. And what happened is when I kind of left academia, I realized how much I hated that and how much the communicating in academia wasn't actually about communicating ideas. It was more about communicating the fact that you really learned in this certain area. And so when I got to there, I kind of made a decision that, all right, I'm now, I know how to write. I know how to, let me back up for a second. What academia is good for is very specifically communicating what it is that you want to communicate, but it doesn't really, the receiver, after it leaves you, that's the other person's problem if they don't understand it. What you've done has been very explicit with what you wanted to say, and you leave yourself no room for misinterpretation. So that part stuck with me. What I didn't like was sometimes it's written so densely that it's so hard for anyone to comprehend it, period. And so then when I moved over to the social media side, you realize that, all right, people need simplicity. They're not, when someone's on Twitter, they're not signing up to read a book. They're not, when someone's on Instagram, again, they're not signing to read an academic paper. What they want is they're looking for something that grabs their attention very quickly and easily. And so the best way to do that is to write simply. And so I've kind of got these two worlds where I've got one that wants to make sure that exactly what I'm saying is what I mean to say, and that there's no other way to interpret it, but also to do it in a way that is super simple and straightforward and, to be frank, fun or enjoyable to read. And so I think it's those two worlds colliding. And again, I've probably produced, I used to say 10,000 pieces or 100,000 pieces of content. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 200 at this point. I did the math once when I was at the stock exchange and, just kind of rounding and rough numbers. And so it's these two different worlds coming together, but it's also, 200,000 different pieces of content. So it's practice and practice and practice and practice. And that's how I got there. And even then, so I'd done all that and I'd started my Twitter profile kind of as you see it today in April or May of last year of 2019. And I decided I wanted to get really good at writing like that. So I just committed to myself. I made a pledge to myself. I'm going to tweet twice a day, minimum, every day. So when you do that, you just kind of have to get better at writing it. Like it's funny, I actually wrote this tweet before we got on this, or had this discussion. But like, if you want to get better at painting, paint every day. If you want to become a better athlete, work out every day. If you want to become a better comedian, write a joke every day. If you want to become a better tweeter, tweet every day. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you end up, you get better at what you do, but you get reinforced with, likes, retweets, whatever it might be. And you start realizing, oh, this is what's resonating. This is what's cutting through the noise. And let me figure out how to recapture that lightning in a bottle for the next tweet, the next tweet, the next tweet. And you're just constantly refining and getting better at what you do.
It's so fascinating because so many people separately have said the same thing, which is if you want to get good at something, set an internal trigger, set an internal goal for what you want to accomplish. And what I mean by that is you said two tweets a day is what you're going to commit to. You didn't say, oh, if I have X followers, then I'm going to tweet. If I something external or how many retweets, you didn't care about that. All you cared about was the internal being something that you could control. And that is so powerful because it eventually leads to the external results, if you focus on the internal.
100%. And then even more from a practical standpoint, I don't know how to practice getting more followers, but I can practice writing a tweet every day. Like when you take something, when you have a goal that's out of your control, it all of a sudden becomes easier to quit that goal, or it becomes easier to stop when, you don't have the same results. But again, if I've committed to tweeting 2 times a day, if that's my only goal, I know that I can accomplish that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so before we leave today, you also had a quote that I needed to bring up to you, because when I heard you say it on, I believe, David Perel's North Star podcast, I wanted to retweet it, but I couldn't because it was in a podcast form, obviously. You said you retweet something because there's something in that tweet that speaks to you that you haven't put into words yet. Talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was so brilliant.
I think that's actually what gets at the heart of a lot of social media, is the stuff that we like, and especially the stuff that we share, is the stuff that we know to be true, that we feel it, but we've never articulated it ourselves. So it's kind of like you've done the thinking yourself, but then someone actually put it to words. And it's like they said it so much more eloquently than you ever could or that you ever thought to. And like that's what really gets people. And that's why I love social media. And that's why I actually love Twitter a lot too, is it's this really concise way of doing that. People retweet stuff and share stuff that they feel, that they already know, that they've just never actually taken the time to write down themselves. And I think it's actually a good exercise for anyone to do. If there's a topic that you think you know well, the best thing that you can do is actually write an essay on it. Because what you're going to find is that you don't know it that well. And writing about it forces you to think more clearly about it. The best ways that I ever come up with ideas, there's really 2 ways that whenever I'm tweeting something, is one, it's a conversation like this. Someone asks me about something and I've got to elaborate on it. And you start talking and you realize that you've never actually put words to these thoughts in your head. And when they're in your head, they're kind of this like cloudy, it's like the Play-Doh's there, but it's not sculpted into anything. And once you put it to words, you've now sculpted it, and now it becomes this more firm thing that you can actually share with other people. The other way is to do it in solitude. So you take an idea and you just sit and write about it. But those are really the only 2 ways that I've ever found that comes to that. But what you realize is when you do either one of those, that you have all these things you think you understand and that you think are really fleshed out, but they're not at all. And it takes you talking to someone, or it takes you writing, to kind of connect all those mental leaps that you'd been taking when you just kind of had it as a vague idea bouncing around in your head.
It makes me so curious. What was the last essay that you wrote about something that just you thought you knew about and that you wanted to expand on?
So I did it about value. So I'm actually working with someone about the methodology behind my tweets. So I shouldn't say the methodology, but kind of like expand upon a 280 character tweet. And one of the themes he picked up on was you constantly tweet about adding value. So let's do something longer form where you tell us what does that mean to you? Like, where did this come from? And so I did that. Haven't published it or anything yet. And I still, maybe by the time that this podcast is live, I'll have published it. But it's this idea of like, let me take these kind of small ideas that I've surmised and expand them into bigger ideas. So it's about this notion of adding value, and that as a species, we're transactional, and that everyone's in every relationship for something. Honestly, let's argue, or you can use this podcast as an example. So this is a transaction for us where we're both benefiting. I'm talking to you about something I enjoy talking to, so I get a benefit out of it. You're creating a podcast and you wanted me as a guest, so you get some benefit out of it. So we're both kind of adding value to each other's lives. And so taking this notion of adding value and looking at it through an evolutionary lens was an interesting exercise that I hadn't done. I hadn't put pen to paper for it, and made me kind of, look at it in a way that I hadn't looked at it before.
So awesome, man. And thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people find you on the social media?
Super easy. M Kobach. So just MKOBACH on Twitter, Instagram. Those are the two big ones I use. I think I have a TikTok, but I rarely ever use it. I just go on there and watch entertaining videos.
Why? Also, before we leave, why don't you have a YouTube channel? Because I'm like, this guy, I would love to see this guy on YouTube. I'd love to watch his stuff. Why don't you have one?
Honestly, time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If I was unemployed or proudly unemployed, if I was doing my own thing, certainly I would continue to diversify even more. Right now, Twitter's fun. Twitter's a hobby. It's easy to produce content there. Instagram is a little harder. It's a little more time consuming, both mentally and time wise. And so for me to kind of start a YouTube channel or doing regular TikToks, the mental energy it would take just to start is overwhelming at this point. And I'd rather use that energy to continue to build fast and work with my teammates there and colleagues there to come up with new ideas.
Awesome. Makes complete sense. And thank you again so much for joining us today, and learned a lot. Can't wait to get this one out to the world. And thank you so much for taking the time, Matthew.
Cool. My pleasure, Danny.
That was my conversation with Matthew Kobach. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda. Love your feedback. Love hearing what you have to say about the episode. And that's all for today, folks. Thank you for listening until the final seconds. I appreciate the hell out of you. And I'll see you guys in the next one.